Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jessica Wilson, Executive Director of New York City Audubon. We're excited to have you with us tonight for an update on our name change process and to hear your feedback on our possible name options. Before we begin, a bit of Zoom housekeeping. As you noticed when you logged in tonight, this Zoom is being recorded. But don't worry, your cameras and microphones are off. We're going to be sharing the recording with all of our members and supporters later this week. We've also enabled closed captioning on the Zoom. But if you can't see the captions and would like to, just go to the bottom of your screen and select Show Captions. We're going to start tonight with a presentation about our name change process, including a bit about the assessment as well. We'll have time after the presentation for questions. Throughout the evening, you can use the Zoom Q&A function to share your questions with the panelists. We're looking forward to your feedback too. After our questions, we'll use Zoom polls to get your input on our possible name options. It's an exciting time at New York City Audubon. This year in 2024, we're going to see new ways to engage New Yorkers with birds and with nature, including our organization's new NYCHA in Nature program, designed for residents of the city's public housing. We're working on new and expanded protections for birds, including a recently passed state bill that bans toxic pesticides. We're working on increasing green roofs throughout the city with new tax incentives. And we're pushing a new lights out bill in City Council. And of course, the reason you're all here tonight, we'll soon be doing this work to protect birds and habitat with a new name. This name change is not done in isolation. It's just one of the many ways we're centering equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in our work to protect birds and habitat. And we're not doing it alone. Many Audubon chapters and entities across the country are also changing their names. You'll hear more about that tonight. These name changes are part of a broader global trend to assess the impact of names on science research and on the conservation movement. As I'm sure many of you heard, the American Ornithological Society recently announced that they will be changing the names of birds that formerly were named after people in order to have a more inclusive process and to focus on the unique features and behaviors of birds themselves. And it's not just the bird world. Groups like the International Botanical Congress and Entomological Society are considering moves to change culturally offensive names of plants and insects. New York City Audubon has been working on that for several years. To tell you more about that, I'm pleased to introduce Karen Benfield, President of New York City Audubon's Board of Directors.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you, Jessica. Good evening to everybody, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. So yes, as many of you will well know, in 2022, the New York City Audubon Board of Directors and staff conducted an in-depth and rigorous assessment of the Audubon name and what it meant to us. This came as we were watching other Audubon entities nationally begin conversations of their own about the Audubon name. And as an urban chapter, we really wanted to determine the extent to which our name posed any kind of a barrier to other people joining our work now or in the future. We wanted to think about how our name could diminish our impact in the future, or whether it was, in fact, diminishing our impact or ability to have impact now. Several chapters considered and enacted name changes, with Seattle's chapter leading the way and becoming what's known as Birds Connect Seattle. The National Audubon Society determined in March of last year that they would retain their name and not make a change. But as an urban chapter, we began a process around that time of education and consideration for ourselves. And we analyzed the impact that the Audubon name has on our mission to protect wild birds and to engage all New Yorkers in the very important work of bird conservation. We didn't take this assessment lightly at all. For more than 40 years, since our founding by Lou Rosenberg and other dedicated bird conservationists, we've been a very proud member of the National Audubon Society, and we remain a proud member of the National Audubon Society. We've worked alongside our partners on important conservation initiatives as a chapter on the Atlantic Flyway and on national initiatives coast to coast. We know that we've benefited from the visibility of the name Audubon, from being part of a large national network. And we also admire the art and contributions of John James Audubon, for whom this chapter, like so many others, took its name. However, in talking with volunteers and members and partner organizations and program participants over time, we ultimately concluded that for us, the Audubon name stands in the way of our engaging diverse audiences and effectively bringing in other people to join our work advocating for and protecting birds. So the board of directors announced its decision to drop Audubon from our name in March 2023, and we began a process to come up with a new name. Throughout our whole process of education and consideration, we've remained committed to the work this organization has undertaken and built on for 4 decades. So our name will change, but who we are at our core and the work that we do, our work for birds and habitat in an urban epicenter, will not. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about our process. So our board will vote on the name in late March, but since the moment of our decision, we have endeavored to create a process for coming up with a new name that is thorough and inclusive. Last year, we formed a task force to take on some of the most important aspects of our name change. That, I hope you, yes, I think you're seeing a slide now. So the task force that we have put together is comprised of board members, staff, advisory council members, and volunteers. We have a wide range of ages, backgrounds, and perspectives represented on the task force to ensure that we consider all facets of our name and avoid blind spots. We collected name suggestions throughout last year in person, online, through our print and online communications, and on our many social media platforms. So we're now collecting feedback on those name options to make sure that we can come up with a name that represents our work to protect birds and habitat in an urban environment. And it has to be something that is inclusive and welcoming for all. And that's been our guiding bottom line. So I'm very happy right now to introduce 2 members of that task force, board members Angie Ko and Vivek Sriram, and they're going to share more information with you about our process.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angie Ko, and thanks for the introduction, Karen. And just to let you know, I have been on the board of directors for 3 years, and I am part of the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Committee, as well as the Conservation Committee and the Advocacy Committee.
Hi, my name is Vivek Sriram. I'm also on the board, and I'm a member of the Finance Committee and the Events Planning Committee, and that's about it.
Yeah, okay, so I'll get started before I pass it off to Vivek. And I want to share a little bit about the process. So we have, as Karen said, been focusing on making this process inclusive and thorough. And we solicited names from members and supporters through communications and at events. So we collected ideas from our digital followers via social media and email newsletter. And we also surveyed thousands of program participants after bird outings and lectures. We ended up with nearly 250 ideas for names, and that's from more than 150 different people. So then the task force also spoke with marketing experts who helped us consider important branding best practices to ensure our new name accomplishes our goals. So, for example, we considered the difference between a descriptive name and an evocative name. So a descriptive name is something that's more understandable straight off the bat. It's descriptive, whereas an evocative name may be something that you don't know what it is right away, but it piques your curiosity. Around this, we also really thought about the accessibility of the name and making that name inviting for as many people and understandable for as many people as possible. We thought about what a name can and cannot do. So it can signal something new, and we're very excited about that. But we also have continuity in our organization. A new name can also cue a whole host of rich associations, and it can begin to tell a story, but it can't say everything that we do or everything that we're about, and it also can't convey the same meaning to everybody. Some criteria that we considered, we thought it was really important that our new name be grounded in our organization's values. Thought about the new name as a quick headline. We thought it should be accessible across languages and also have no unintended consequences. We also considered the names of other chapters, and Karen touched upon this, but a few dozen chapters around the country have announced that they are also changing their names. And several of those chapters have chosen similar names, with the difference being their geographic location. So for example, Bird Alliance is one of those names, Birds Connect is a name, and also simply Birds. So in that example, Birds, New York City. And so based on that, the task force narrowed down those 250 names to the list of top 5 names. And Vivek, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Angie. I believe we should see the, so we have, using these criteria, we came up with the top 5 names, as you see out here. The first 2 names are uniquely, we believe, would be unique names to our organization. And the last 3, Birds NYC, Birds Connect, and NYC Bird Alliance, the Birds Bird Alliance, Birds Connect, and Birds itself have been taken by other chapters. So there's some connectivity there in the name itself. As you notice, all the names have the geographical location we felt was pretty important too. So I'll just, I believe as Karen said, the next steps are that we get your feedback, and then we get feedback through some other channels, and then we come up with the top name. I'll just send it back to Jessica now for Q&A.
Thank you, Vivek, and thank you, Angie, and thank you to the whole task force for being part of this work. We're really eager for everyone's input on those top 5 name choices. But first, we know you have some questions about the process. So we're going to open up the floor for your questions. At this time, please use the Q&A function of the Zoom, probably found on the bottom of the screen, to write in your questions. My colleague, Aidan Donaghy, who many of you know from his work managing our membership program, will review the questions and share those questions with the speakers.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So as Jessica said, you can start to submit some questions through the Q&A function. I'm seeing one already. Here's a question that I think you can answer, Jessica. How are you working, if at all, with other chapters on our renaming process?
It's a great question. As a chapter of the National Audubon Society, our work really depends on partnerships with chapters up and down the Atlantic Flyway and across the country, because the birds don't know the difference between our different groups. And so we have to work with them. And that's been true on our name change as well. So from the very first conversations that chapters and National Audubon Society started to have 3 or 4 years ago about the Audubon name, New York City Audubon has been in close contact with other chapters. I talk and I meet frequently with the heads of the other large urban chapters across the country. There's about 15 or 20 of us. We have a coalition that talks frequently and shares ideas. Nearly all of those chapters are changing their name, or will be announcing soon that they're changing their names. And we've moved through this work collaboratively. We figured out together how we collect input from our audiences, how we work with National Audubon Society on this, how we establish inclusive processes, what our communication should look like. We've shared FAQs, and we've compiled lists of resources and readings that we can share with our audience. We've also fielded a lot of questions from chapter leaders across the country who are either just starting their assessment process or wondering, tips on how we did it. And at this point, as you heard earlier from Angie, a few dozen chapters have either announced that they're changing their names, or in some cases have already chosen their names. So as you know, there's a lot of bird alliances out there. We have Chicago Bird Alliance, Detroit Bird Alliance, Golden Gate Bird Alliance. There's Birds Connect Seattle, there's Birds Georgia, there's a bunch of names like that. And as you heard, we're considering the merits of those names. 3 of them were on our top 5 list, but we also want to choose something that's authentic to us, to New York, and to New Yorkers and to New York birds. And that's an important consideration that we're eager for your input on tonight. Every chapter has its own timeline for this. There's some chapters that decided years ago to change their name. There are others that are just starting their assessment now. But what's important is that our work and the birds are going to continue to link us, and we'll continue to be in close contact with both chapters and National Audubon Society, no matter what our name is.
All right, thank you, Jessica. I think this is sort of a continuation of that's what someone asked. Maybe you and Karen can both address this question. Is it important to us that our name is recognizable nationally?
Karen, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, yes, it is important that it's identifiable nationally, which is why one of the parameters we established in thinking about a name was saying that it had to have where we work in it. So New York City is where we do our work as a chapter. So we would like our name to identify that we are the chapter that works in one of the biggest cities with lots of problems for birds. So we will be New York City, whatever we become. So yes, that's important. At the same time, we also didn't feel that we had to twin or follow any other chapter. We are an urban chapter of the National Audubon Society, and our constituents, well, they're really birds, but the members who help us do our work, the human beings, are members of an incredibly large, diverse, dynamic city. And so we're very different from maybe a smaller rural chapter of National Audubon. So in choosing our name, it's really important that we stay true to who we are, an urban chapter of the National Audubon Society that works in New York City.
Thanks, Karen. Here's a question that maybe I think can go to Angie. So if the name change is part of our mission to be more equitable and inclusive, what other steps are we taking towards that goal?
I'm happy to answer that. I think that's a really great question. So equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, we call that EDIA in New York City Audubon. It's really foundational to our organization, and we try to center all of our work with an EDI lens, let's say. So for years, we've worked to do this in conservation, in engagement, and in advocacy, and as well as in communications and outreach. And so some examples, we have a science and conservation work, expanding research in green roofs, which is reducing stormwater runoff and ambient temperatures. That's really important in a city with heat island effects. And we're currently pushing for expanding the green roof tax abatement in state legislature to increase green roof development in environmentally vulnerable neighborhoods. And these are neighborhoods that have very few access, that don't have the same access, let's say, to parks and green spaces or water. So this kind of green roof would be really important in those neighborhoods. We also have public programs that are really focused on accessibility with bird outings in multiple languages, and also outings for people with mobility impairments. Most of our programs are free, and there's a lot of programming for beginning birders. We also have a new NYCHA nature program. Jessica talked about this briefly in the beginning. And this we have to engage residents of the city's public housing and to engage them with birds and with nature right here in their backyards and in their city. We also just published the city's first Spanish-English field guide to birds, and we're really excited about that. That's available free of charge. And there's a lot more information, and I would really invite anybody interested to take a look at our website, NYCCityAudubon.org, and there's a whole page on our EDIA initiatives. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Angie. That was really helpful. I have a question here that I think can go to Vivek as a member of the fundraising or the finance committee. Do we expect to lose members or donors as a result of the name change?
Thanks, Aiden. Yeah, in the short term, we may lose support from a few past supporters who are not happy about the name change. But, you know, on balance, when we announced our plans to change our name last year, we attracted many new supporters and members who were happy about the change and the inclusivity that it signaled. We're also now attracting funding from new institutional grant makers that may not have considered us before, thanks to the name change proposal. And after running financial projections and looking at the impact of the name change on our fundraising, we believe that over time, we will end up with a larger base of supporters to involve us in our work and to move forward successfully.
Thank you, Vivek. Another question for Jessica. With the new name, how are we planning to clarify to current and potential supporters our connection to National Audubon and to the other chapters?
It's a good question. For nearly 45 years, we've had this sort of visual and named linkage to the other chapters and to National Audubon. And now we're going to lose that. And, you know, as we talked about, a lot of chapters are going to have different names, and National Audubon's site is keeping theirs. And so what we expect to do is always have, we'll have a new logo, a refreshed logo with our new name, and we're planning to have a tagline that runs along with that indicates that we're a chapter of National Audubon. And certainly it will be front and center in our communications, just as it is now. We always lead with the fact that we're a member of that chapter network.
Thanks, Jessica. And here's a question for Mike. How does their name change actually help us save birds?
Hi, everyone. Just joining in. Mike Yuan, Executive Vice President of the Board of Directors. Yeah, how does the name change help us? I think in today's conservation movement, we need everyone's help in understanding how birds help us. And in New York City, it's more important than ever. We're here at New York City Audubon. We're here to serve all of New York, all New Yorkers. So, you know, our board member, Chris Cooper, once said, and I think it's very poignant, that a diversity of birds requires a diversity of people. Everyone needs to be involved. So I believe being as welcome as possible with starting with our name and with the works that we do is just exactly the right step to engage everyone.
Thank you, Mike. Here's a question that I think goes back to our earlier discussion about our name and connecting it to other chapters. Should all chapters have a common denominator in their name as a substitute for the word Audubon?
Karen, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, let me give that one a try. So that's a great question, and it's one that our naming task force has been exploring in their conversations as a committee, and in their conversations with outside marketing executives as well. You know, would it, in a perfect world, would every chapter changing its name choose the same name? Maybe so. Maybe that would provide sort of a spine of connectivity among chapters that certainly isn't currently the case. You know, for the first chapter to change its name is calling itself Birds Connect Seattle. And I think the idea there that they were going for is that birds connect the country. They use flyways, they connect the world because they're migrating, they connect human beings who care about them. So I think that was the goal there in that name. Other chapters have a couple of chapters have chosen a similar name. They have a word in there that links them, as Angie noted. So I think I can't specifically answer that question because we haven't come to our own conclusion on that. I think that there are benefits to having synergy in the name itself, or recognition in the name. For us, really, we're going to end up, I think, with a name that feels right for New York City Audubon as we are now. And what might be even more important then will be what that tagline that Jessica referred to is that we have under our name, which it says, you know, a chapter member of the National Audubon Society. And that's an identity that we intend to keep. So that will be there with alongside our new name. So I hope that helps. It's a really good question.
Thank you, Karen. And I think we have time for about one more question. Yes, Jessica, this I think can go to you. Are there chapters nearby in New Jersey and Connecticut that are also considering name changes?
There are, and this sure would be easier if all of the chapters in the Northeast would do it along with us. But everyone's on their own timeline. It's also a little complicated because, as some of you know, New Jersey Audubon and some of the other Audubon entities in Northeast are what's called independent. They're actually not formally affiliated with the National Audubon Society, even though we actually work very closely with New Jersey Audubon. And so New Jersey Audubon doesn't have a chapter system. Connecticut Audubon does. And there are some chapters in Connecticut and elsewhere in New York that are considering a name change, including the Buffalo Audubon Society, I believe has announced that it will be changing its name as well. The New York City Audubon is an active member in the Audubon Chapter Council of New York and Connecticut, and we meet frequently with the volunteer and staff leaders of those chapters. And we've fielded a lot of questions from other chapters who are looking at similar processes. And I expect that once we announce our name change, some other chapters may come forward with the same.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. How are we on time?
I think we should probably move it along.
Okay.
But these were great questions. I know there were more that we didn't get to. And if we didn't get a chance to address your questions, then we'll follow up with you with the separate email. We got your name. And certainly if you have other questions as they occur to you tonight, just drop them into the Q&A and we'll get back to you later in the week. In addition to your questions, your very good questions, we're also really looking forward to your input on those top 5 name choices. And hopefully our answers to those previous questions provide a little context, which can guide your input. So here to collect your ideas and your input is back to Mike Yuen. As you heard from Mike, he had the chance to introduce himself. He is the Executive Vice President of the Board of Directors. Mike.
Thanks. So we're going to use a little bit of our Zoom technology to conduct a Zoom poll, and we're looking forward to getting your feedback on our top 5 names right now. So as Vivek and Angie have described to you, our task force has been engaging our stakeholders, speaking with everyone involved in New York City Audubon on input for the name, and we whittled it down to those top 5. So now we'd love to get your feedback on those top 5 with a couple poll questions. So that first poll should be coming up soon. Yep. So this first question, rank our top 5 names in the order that you prefer. So I believe the way you'll do this, you first might need to widen that window that popped up in your Zoom to see all 5 questions or options. And then in order of preference, click the space next to the name that you prefer. And we'll leave about a minute to do each one of these 4 poll questions that we're going to ask you tonight. All right. About 10 seconds to add in your rank. And if I see some activity, I think we might be able to extend it a little bit. Still seeing a little activity but the popcorn is slowing down, so let's give it another 15 seconds. And this is the most difficult one, so I'm giving us a little difficult one to answer, so I'm giving us a little bit more time to do that. All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next question.
Mike, do you want to first just share the results?
Yeah, I'm trying to interpret the results here. It's different colors for me. So it looks like New York City Bird Alliance, NYC Bird Alliance, had the majority as ranked number 1, followed by NYC Bird Conservancy. I'd say about half of the respondents went with that as their top choice. A lot of them went with that as their second choice. Birds NYC, slightly behind in 3rd place, and then distant 4th and 5th, Birds Connect New York City and Birds for All NYC. Great. Thanks for your feedback there. Next question. How important to you is aligning our name with other newly named chapters? This is just one choice, so we'll try to wrap up the responses in 1 minute for this one. All right, it looks like activity has slowed down here. And so how important to you is aligning our name with other newly named chapters? Somewhat important is in the lead here with just under half of respondents choosing that option. Not important, about 1/3 of the respondents, and then very important, I'd say about a quarter, judging on the length of the lines that I could see here. And thanks for your response on that. Our 3rd question, which name best conveys our work to protect wild birds and habitat? These again are our top 5 names. NYC Bird Alliance, Birds Connect New York City, Birds for All New York City, NYC Bird Conservancy, and Birds NYC, or the reverse of that, NYC Birds. Take another 10 seconds to put in your choice. Okay, and that's our minute. Not surprisingly, I think NYC Bird Conservancy was the clear choice here with about 70% of the votes. Yeah, and that the word conservancy does communicate something. NYC Bird Alliance is a distant second, and then not getting very many votes at all, Birds Connect, Birds for All New York City, and Birds NYC. Now for our fourth and final poll question, which name feels the most inclusive and welcoming to you? It's the same top 5 again. Most everyone has answered, but I'll give everyone another 10 seconds or so to complete this final question. Interesting, and thanks for your responses there. Interesting. Of all of our questions, this one has the closest amongst two. NYC Bird Alliance and Birds for All NYC are pretty close, with about a third of the votes as their top choice, or their choice, and then followed by NYC Bird Conservancy, and then Birds NYC and Birds Connect, with under 10% of our respondents saying that was their top choice. Thank you so much for this valuable feedback for us. Our task force is going to definitely take this into account with all of the other inputs they're getting from our stakeholders. But it was great to see very specific points and responses to these questions. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it back to Jessica for some final remarks.
Thanks so much, Mike. And thanks to you all for your input on the polls and the good questions you asked earlier. If you have additional input to share that we couldn't just capture in those short little Zoom polls, let us know. You can share that input or more questions by emailing me directly at jessica@nycaudubon.org, or just reply to the emails you received about the event. As Mike said, we're going to be taking all the input we gathered tonight from the 60 or so participants here with us and the several hundred more that registered and are going to be getting the Zoom link. We're also going to be talking to our many stakeholders, including our thousands of volunteers, our hundreds of partner organizations, our bird guides and naturalists, and our funders to collect their input on these names. We'll also be doing some vetting of those names, thinking through the legal and administrative implications of those names, making sure, of course, that they're available, they translate well to other languages, the acronyms are clear. And then the task force is going to think about all of this, all the vetting, all of the input we've received, and they have the difficult job of narrowing down 5 names to just 2. At the end of March, our board of directors will vote on what the final name will be. We expect to announce the new name soon after that, and then roll it out in phases throughout the spring. Our new name is going to arrive just as the birds return to the city, and we have lots planned for spring migration, in addition to a new name. Make sure to keep an eye on your email and on our website for our really full calendar of spring migration bird outings, classes, and festivals across the city. Remember that members get early access to book those events, and you get other special perks for our programs. So make sure to keep your membership current and keep an eye on your email. As Karen mentioned earlier, though our name will change, our work to protect birds and habitat won't. We remain committed to birds. We remain a committed and active chapter of National Audubon Society. And we remain incredibly grateful and appreciative for our members and for our supporters. Thank you all for your commitment to the organization and to protecting birds. Thanks for joining us again, and good night.